What's up, guys, and welcome back to Fight Promoter University. This is Money Fights, where we talk about the business behind the sport that we love, combat sports, boxing and MMA. We talk about how it relates to both club shows as well as the pay-per-view level, and just dive into some of the business stuff behind the scenes. So we were asked to talk about matchmaking. And so I'm just going to go into, we go into detail in our online program, fightpromoteruniversity.com, in much more detail, and actually interview a couple matchmakers who work for big organizations as well as local club matchmakers. But just to give an overview, specifically they were asking, what does a matchmaker meeting look like? How do you put these fights together? What's the decisions? What's the reasoning behind some of the decisions? And just like most, there's no one answer to this question. It really comes down to, let me start with the club show level. So most club promoters either do their own matchmaking, or the smart ones hire a matchmaker, whether full-time or just on a contract basis for a card. The reason for that is matchmaking is almost a full-time job in itself. Not only are you negotiating and trying to put the fights on for the fighters, but then there's so many external factors. You know, you've got fighters that drop out. You got fighters that didn't want to take a hard fight and they accept it for the money initially, and then as their fight camp goes on, they don't have as much confidence anymore, and then they look for reasons to get out, or they try and find another fight when they've already agreed to one and come up with so there's so many things there. There's a lot of management involved in it. Reaching out to teams. You've got, a fighter, their team can be anyone from a manager, a trainer, a parent, their peers, all giving them advice and have their own thoughts on who they should fight. And I've touched on this before. Too many fighters, when they're a couple fights into their career, they're not really fighters. They're professional matchmakers who just happen to fight. So they think that they really need to be super picky about their first couple fights in their careers, and it's just not the case. So anyway, it's just a lot. And that's why I always recommend hire a matchmaker, pay them, for a club show, you can hire a matchmaker for anywhere from $100 to $200 per fight that they match up and get contracts signed for, or you can give them, hey, I've got $10,000 for the entire purse. If you can put together 7 fights, a bunch of 4-rounders and 2 6-rounders, I've got 10 grand. If you can keep the whole purse under that, you get the rest. Or, you tell them, hey, for every fight that you get, I'll give you a certain percentage of the gate. There's a million different ways to negotiate it. And there's not really matchmaker meetings per se at that level. There's just not. As the promoter, you're probably going to have your hand in the matching up the main event, but the rest of it, just leave that to the matchmaker. Trust them, give them your scope. Like, say, hey, I want the card to at least have one fighter on every fight needs to at least be a local fighter to the city I'm putting the show onto. Give them some of your scope of work behind it, and then just let them run with it. Don't immerse yourself in the details. As a promoter, your job is as a promoter, as a marketer, as someone who's going to drum up interest, who's going to talk to media and PR and worry about seating charts and selling tickets and ring lighting and all these cage lighting and all these things. So many things that you need to be focused on that's actually going to be revenue generating, activities for you. Whereas matchmaker is really focused on expense generating activities. And don't get me wrong, the fighters are a very important expense. You can't have your event without them. But once you're going to put it on, give it to somebody else. Just trust me on that. Worry about the main event, maybe the co-main event if you want, because I realize that matchmaking is the sexy side of the business, but you will be drowning if you think you can matchmake a whole card and successfully market it properly. So there's that. So when you matchmake at the club level as well, again, I always say stop keep treating these fighters like world champs when they're not. They should be willing to face tough competition. That's not to say someone who has a promising career ahead of them goes and fights an Olympic champ in fight number 4 of their career. I'm not saying that, but um, within reason, these guys should be fighting almost anyone that's presented to them at that level. So there's not a whole lot that goes into it. Now, there's always going to be an A side and a B side, of course. The A side at the club level is going to be the ticket sellers or the fighter who has a strong amateur pedigree who you think actually has a real shot at a world title. Really, there's always going to be an A side and a B side. There's going to be a favorite and an underdog. And so, if you have signed a fighter to a long-term agreement or they're local to your city that sells a lot of tickets, well, you're going to want to put them in the ring with somebody or in the cage with somebody who's not necessarily a killer for your first show. And there's a lot of things. And then we start getting into styles. Like, okay, are you, if we're talking MMA, do you have a guy or girl who's a really great striker, but their wrestling is kind of suspect? So you're probably not going to want to put them in there with someone who's a wrestler. Whereas conversely with boxing, are you promoting someone who, as an orthodox fighter, has never faced a southpaw before? Well, in your first fight with them, or maybe in their main event fight with you, maybe you don't want to match them with a southpaw. Maybe you don't want to force them to go up a weight. Sometimes it can be hard to find matchups. And what happens at the lower levels is, let's say a welterweight might be willing to fight at junior middleweight or middleweight, at that level just to stay active. Well, if they're going to be a key part of your card and they're selling $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 worth of tickets, maybe you don't have them jump up in weight. So these are the kinds of things you need to be thinking about. You want to get them a win, but you don't want it to be a guaranteed win. You want it to be an exciting fight. You want them to be challenged. So there's that. Now, at the pay-per-view level, at the big championship level, the top ranks, the UFCs, all this, there's a bigger marketing perspective that you have to take with all this. So instead of just ticket sales, you're worried about millions of dollars of fan revenue, whether that's merchandise, pay-per-view buys, social media followers. There's so many layers to it. And so the last thing you want to do is damage your cash cow unless that cash cow is facing somebody else who could potentially be a cash cow. Does that make sense? Or two cash cows are facing each other. So the worst thing that could happen for the UFC right now is for Conor McGregor to have lost to Donald Cerrone or to lose this Saturday to Dustin Poirier. And that's not because neither one of those got Poirier or Cerrone aren't marketable or great fighters in their own right. They're just not at that level, and they don't have the personality or skill to ever be at that 1A level. Great fighters. Again, this is not disrespect. They kick my ass. They kick most people in the world's ass. But there is a difference between that 1A level of competition and everybody else. I think Conor said it great. He said, Dustin's a great fighter, but even that is levels below me. And that's not just from a skill standpoint. That is from a marketability standpoint. That's what we're talking about here. So that almost takes precedence over just letting the competition win out. You have to protect guys that are revenue generators for your business. And that's why it's both a blessing and a curse, because those types of girl and guy fighters, like for example, when Ronda Rousey lost, not great for the UFC. Amanda Nunes, as great as she is not nearly as marketable as Ronda Rousey was. Dana White, he can't admit it, but the last thing he wants to see is a Conor McGregor loss this weekend for all of the reasons I outlined. So right now they're doing the smart thing. They're giving him exciting fights in the ring that Conor is understandably at least a 2-1 favorite in and should be. So the odds of him losing these couple fights are minimal. And also stylistically it matches up. When you put Conor in there with a striker in MMA, it's going to be very hard to beat him. I think the only way to really beat Conor is to put him in there with an elite wrestler, which, you saw even that doesn't work sometimes. Mendez, and he's fought others. So, but Khabib's obviously on an Olympic level as a wrestler. So, and that's why he lost that. So, there's all these things go into it. First and foremost, you are a business. You are not a fan. Just remember that. You are not putting on fights that the majority of people are going to agree is the most fair thing for you to do. No, you're putting on a fight that is going to be the most revenue generating event for your business, as well as going to set up future revenue generating events for your business. You do not want to you do not want to bite off your nose to spite your face. In the effort of being fair and all that, the life is not fair. And neither is this business. So, in an effort to be fair, you don't want to ruin possibly thousands at the club level and millions at the pay-per-view level by throwing one of your guys against a killer who's not nearly as well known. That's why fights get marinated a lot, and you hear that a lot. Oh, they're marinating the fight. Let these two build up. It's because one fighter is typically exponentially more popular than the other or more talented, and you don't want to risk a loss until they're both very close to that same level so it doesn't damage them. You see, Khabib was a star by the time him and McGregor fought, just as an example. I keep coming back to McGregor because he's fighting here on Saturday, but Khabib and McGregor were very close to the same level in terms of popularity when they eventually fought. So that loss that McGregor took was not nearly as detrimental to his career as, say, a loss to Dustin Poirier would be, because Poirier is viewed as a top fighter for sure, but he's not a special fighter, if that makes sense. So I hope that helped. Again, if we're talking club level, because I know 99% of you are at the club level who are working these questions and reaching out to us, and ticket sellers should get preferential treatment. You should not bog yourself down with the details of matchmaking a whole card. There's not any matchmaker meetings necessarily. It's the promoter's call what he wants to delegate and what he doesn't want to delegate. He or she. So I would recommend, if you want to matchmake the main event or the co-main event, by all means do it. Get your feet wet with it. And to be honest, you can't even announce a fight until you have at least a main event anyway. So start there. But reach out to a matchmaker. Have them put together the rest of your card, the other 6, 7, 8 fights. You'll save yourself a lot of time. You'll save yourself a lot of aggravation. And you'll actually make more money in the long run because you won't be emotionally attached, having a lot of your time and effort going into matchmaking, guys and girls who maybe only have a couple fights in their career. And you can focus on putting butts in seats, selling online pay-per-view, bringing in sponsors, and just promoting your event the right way. So I hope that helps, guys. Again, if you need any more help, feel free, write in the comments, give us suggestions, ask questions. We'll try to get back to you. As well as if you need even more information, especially about this matchmaker angle, and you want to do a deep dive into the details of how to do it extremely successfully, visit fightpromoteruniversity.com. Thank you.